home inspection. I'm going to take a lot of the pressure off for you right now. So I have been licensed for 14 years, and every time I do a home inspection, the home inspector talks about things that I've never heard of before. So do not feel the pressure to be an expert on anything. In fact, if you try to act like an expert on the home when you really don't know squat, it's going to backfire. So take the pressure off. There's lots of things that you don't need to know. So this is my best practices for when your client just got an offer accepted and they're going to have the home inspected. Frequently, they're going to actually ask you, who do you recommend for a home inspector? And then you're going to give off one or at least two names so they get to choose of a vendor of your choosing. The best way, if you're going to select a couple of vendors that are home inspectors, this is how I've kind of fallen into finding home inspectors that I'm going to recommend to other clients. I want home inspectors that are fair. They're going to always tell the truth, but tell the truth in such a way that the client needs to hear it relative to other homes in the market. There's some home inspectors out there that just want to sound like super smart and knowledgeable. So they'll see something, like I live in an area where there's lots of homes that are 100 plus years old. Every home has some subluxation. The foundation's like cracking on every home that's out here. It's really normal industry practice to buy a home that has some cracking foundation. But you're gonna find a home inspector and they go, oh, the foundation's cracking. And just even in the way they delivered that news to the client, it's gonna send the client a little bit of a panic attack. And so find an inspector that will deliver the news. I see if there's a little subluxation, you're going to want to watch that. More than likely, it's because the downspout has been pouring right here by the foundation, building up over a couple decades. If you just begin to redirect that downspout out, should solve that problem. Like, that's the way a home inspector should deliver the news, that there's a little bit of cracking in the foundation on a certain part of the house. Now, that same home inspector, it's their job to actually inform the client of anything that's pending in the pending repairs or anything that's of a bigger issue. I'm not going to stand in the way of what them sharing. I of course really do want the best for my clients, so I want the home inspector to notify them of any imminent concerns that's actually going to be a detractor or a big cost investment to them. The roof is going bad. Anything that has to do with the bones, I definitely want the home inspector to disclose that. However, I don't want to try to argue or negotiate or try to have to prove, well, actually, this is happening. Do you know how much credibility you lose if the home inspector says the foundation is bad and you say, actually, there's a lot of homes that are 100 years old around here. He doesn't really know what he's talking about. That's the quickest way to put you on odds with the client. So choosing the home inspector that's going to tell them the truth, but in such a way that actually delivers the news but doesn't actually poo-poo the party is how you get to choose a home inspector. But what happens if they choose the home inspector and you don't even met this guy before, or you don't really know much about him? Even better, distance yourself from this individual completely. My best practice, you show up to a home, you don't know the home inspector, you get to know him, you ask him some questions, because of course you want to kind of get to know this individual, but at the same time, it's between them and the client. So my best course of practice is kind of like showing homes. Always stay a room and a half behind. They're going to go in there, and what the home inspector actually does is they're going to basically take a GFCI outlet connector and go in every outlet. They're going to check the microwave. They're going to look for mold. They're going to look at the awnings. They're going to look at the soffit. They're going to look at the fascia board. They're going to look at everything. So I just am there, right? Sometimes it's a 3-hour process, and I'm just always 20 feet behind. The home inspector is going to point something out, and I'm going to kind of take notes of it. They're going to typically give you all this information on a report for you and the buyer to meet with later, but I'm just trying to show the buyer that I'm attentive to the process. If it's a newer home, it's a 2000, it's built in 2000 or newer, and it's in a HOA, I'm pretty positive there's going to be very few things that are going to find that are going to go bump in the night. Does that mean I want to just go sit in my car and wait and watch YouTube highlights? No, I'm still just a room and a half behind. I'm 15, 20 feet behind. Like, to me, the commission check has always been so big. I don't know why I wouldn't show up full attention every time there's an opportunity to interface with the client. Think about this. You met the client at a buyer's consultation. You met the client at an open house, that's 15 minutes. You did a buyer's consultation, that's another 45 minutes. And you toured homes, so you've seen 6 homes for a grand total of 3 hours. You spent 5 hours with this client the entire time. Being super attentive during the home inspection process is the cheapest way to save yourself a commission check, because 2 weeks from now, we're already through inspection, but there's going to be something that's going to go wrong with the appraisal or some other issue that's going to kind of bump up or creep up in the night. And I want to have had that emotional collateral with the client to show them that I'm super invested in every part of this process. That although that I'm a real estate agent and I do this as my day job, every time you even come across a home that has a cracked window and the home inspector is pointing that out, I'm actually taking notes and talking about it and actually offering a solution. Do you want me to get the window guy? I'm just trying to be mirror and match. So the buyer is super excited to learn all these things. I want to be just as excited with them, even if this is my 700th time of them showing me that same issue on the foundation or the same Federal Pacific panel that's been replaced. I never wanted to take it for granted that this was my client's first time hearing this news. So I didn't want to be like, yeah, Federal Pacific panels have all been recalled. I wanted to be like, oh yeah, that's an important thing. We want to address that. Whatever the client wants to hear from you. Which leads us to, can we address it? What happens on the negotiation part? There is this whole second phase of negotiation that comes up with the inspection response. Well, this is how I would always see best practice being. You're going to have a client and they're going to have 32 items they're going to want to ask you to put on the inspection response. And you don't really know how to respond. You don't know if you should argue with them. Some of these things are not really that important. It's a leaking hose bib, right? But how do you actually tell your client no? Like, you want to show them that you're in the pudding with them, like you're there to be helpful. This is kind of how I always boiled it down. So you get the inspection report, you sit down with the client, I say, what's important to you? And they're going to say these 32 items. And I say, outstanding. Are you willing to walk away from the home if we don't get these 32 items taken care of? They'll say, no, but we got to have these 7. And I'd say, outstanding. So let's ask for these 7 to be handled. The client's going to respond 9 times out of 10. Okay, let's ask for those 7 and also a price reduction. And then you can respond with this. Okay, we can do that. Of course, it's you in this home. However, after everything we've seen, out of all the homes on the market, are you willing to walk away from this home over a few $1,000s? If they actually handle these 7 items on the punch list and they say they're going to do it, will that satisfy you enough to know that we should proceed? Most of the time, your client's going to say, actually, yes, it would. Great. So I say, of these 7 items, let me now ask you, how many of these are things we really must ask for, or how many of these things could be fixed by you, a 6-pack of beer, and a buddy? If it can be fixed by you, a 6-pack and a beer, and a buddy, then maybe we don't really want to ask for it. We just want to make sure we get these few key items taken care of. Now, that is my line. I've used that line, I don't know, I'm not going to say 700 times, but I would say close to 100 times. If it's an item that you, a buddy, and a 6-pack of beer, heck, a $50 Home Depot gift card and a 6-pack of beer could handle, should we really be asking for it? So you want to kind of help your buyer narrow down and winnow down what's really important. Now, there are lots of things you should ask for in a home inspection. Anything that's going to cost multiple thousands of dollars. You don't know their financial situation, and if you do, if they need to have a new roof replaced, that's definitely an item you want to take care of. But if it has to do with the bones, right, those are the things that I feel like are worthy of actually asking for an inspection response. If it's because the garbage disposal doesn't work, I mean, okay. If they're diehard about asking for the garbage disposal to not work, but also then it can kind of become sometimes like a negotiation thing. Like, they're not even, at some point, a client might stop thinking about how much this house means to them, and they just want to win a negotiation. So if that's the case, of course, include the garbage disposal to be replaced, and that might just be something that they can agree to that doesn't cost anyone much of anything. But be very mindful. It's just like when you go buy a car on a car lot. If a car is listed for $40,000 and you go there and you just paid $40,000, it doesn't matter if it's your dream car, everything you wanted, you feel like you kind of left something on the table. You always want to get something included. And so it's the same thing with an inspection response. Include something, but also be aware that the seller might just come back and say they're not going to fix anything. But don't set yourself up to say that you're going to negotiate to get this thing approved. It's the worst thing you can do, is to tell your client that you're going to be the one to get this thing to go through, because you have no control over that. You can't tell what the cross-sell agent or the seller are going to do. All you can respond with is, I can understand what's important to you, and I will certainly ask. There isn't much more to it. Don't overthink it. Again, if you kind of listen to some of my other videos, it's all about kind of asking more questions, active listening, but there isn't much in the way of a negotiation tactic, because you don't actually get to sit down with that seller yourself. You're having to present this to the cross-sell agent that's going to then go present to the client. So remove yourself. Don't stand on being an expert negotiator all your past years of getting other clients great deals. Just let the paper talk. So that goes when you actually submit the offer to the cross-sale agent. Let the paper talk. There's no need for you to say, well, this is really important to my client. They don't care. Like, they don't care that it's important to your client. They care what the paper says. So the best way to actually ask for items when you're dealing with a cross-sale agent is to not call them up or verbalize it, because then they're going to feel possessive about, my buyer won't do this or my seller won't do that. Just let the paper talk. Submit them what your buyer's requests are. No need to even say things like, I know they're kind of unreasonable, let's just see what you can do, because then you're not actually protecting your client from a fiduciary responsibility. Just email over the inspection response and wait for the email return. Your client is, of course, going to say, did you call them up and negotiate for me? And your answer is going to be, I absolutely did. But they don't need to know that you doing the best thing for them wasn't actually calling up the other client and negotiating. It was just calling up the other client and saying, did you receive my 35R? Yes? Okay, great. There you go. Best tips and practices for an inspection response with a cross-sell agent.